Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing very well during these weird times. First of all, thank you for joining today's session. This session is actually part of a series, and this series is called the ACM After School Club. So if you like today's session and you're looking for more, well, there are more on the way, so keep an eye out for those details later on. First, before we get into today's session, I just want to discuss what we'll be covering today. And I do have a small task as well. Before we get into that, I also just want to introduce myself. My name is David McGreen. I'm a games development tutor here at ACM, and I primarily teach on the games design pathway. We also have a number of other tutors being involved in these sessions, so again, keep an eye out for those that are upcoming. But coming back to today's session, what I want to discuss are just a number of careers that are available in the games industry. So I picked five from different specialisms. And what I'm hoping that you will get out of this is maybe for those of you who haven't decided on where exactly you would like to work in the game industry, or haven't just decided at this moment in time, to start either thinking about where you would like to be, or to help you decide on, in particular, the role. Some of these careers you may have heard of, or should I say roles you may have heard of or haven't heard of before, but starting to think about how you would fit into these positions, or which one of these may be of interest, can start to help you on that journey of finding out where you would like to work in the games industry. So without further ado, let's have a look at our first career that we have on our session, and that is a game designer. So I'm sure many of you here will actually be very interested in becoming a game designer, I'm sure. And a game designer is someone who is responsible for the creation of a game, the creation of the idea, creation for the mechanics, the systems, how the player interacts with the game. They're responsible for the entire concept and all of the small details. Sometimes you may have more than one designer, but they're responsible for fleshing out the details. A game designer will have an initial idea, and they will bring that all through production to release. They will make sure that everything is trying to stay consistent with the original idea. So whether things may need to be balanced, or values may need to be changed, or ideas may need to be tweaked. This is starting to align with some of the key skills that I would like to discuss, that you will find common, but also of real value to have for anyone who is interested in being a game designer. So first of all, as a game designer, you'll be coming up with ideas all the time. So being creative is of real benefit. Coming up with ideas, or also how to solve problems. Problem solving is something you're going to be facing a lot as a game designer. How to balance game issues, how to get around issues with the design itself. This is where being creative and looking at alternative ways to find solutions, so how to solve a problem in really interesting ways, or come up with an idea entirely that's quite unique and innovative. Secondly, we have experience with game engines and scripting. So as a game designer, often be the case you'll be involved in balancing issues that may be involved in just tweaking values, the placement of things. So as a game designer, you may be asked to get involved with game engines like Unity or Unreal, and also the scripting of those, just to play with those values to, again, make sure that that intended idea is kept consistent. There's lots of examples where games have issues where things are either too powerful, or they're too weak, or they need slight adjustments. So a game designer will come into play, and they would either tweak the values, or coming back to my earlier point with creativity, they would come up with a new idea to solve that problem. Maybe it be a new mechanic or another approach. Next, we have design methodologies. So unfortunately, I don't have too much time to go into these much today, but it's thinking about the structure, the frameworks, the ways that you can go and approach the design of the game, and how that all relates to the player experience. So these are quite wide ranging. There's a lot to cover, and these are some of the points that we cover on our degree program. But I'd recommend for anyone who's interested in game design is to start doing some research, start looking up some of the design books out there. There's lots of resources online. Just start thinking in this particular manner. Unfortunately, I just don't have that much time to cover these today. But coming into the next 3 points, these are actually points or key skills, I should say. Key skills are going to be common across the rest of these careers I'm demonstrating today. You're going to see them on each page, and it's because as a game developer, they're vitally important regardless of where you're working in a project or in a team. So starting out with communication. So for a game designer, this is vitally important because one, you're the person coming up with an idea. You need to get that idea across to other people. If you're working with a programmer, well, they need to know what they need to program. They need to know what they need to make. They need to understand what is that they're making. So it's vitally important to get across what the design is, how it works, and the details around that, so the rest of the team and rest of the development members can go ahead and begin developing that. It's also the case with game designers that they may need to talk with members or people who aren't a part of the development team. So for example, if a game needs investment, you may be talking to investors. So it's having the skills, the communication skills, to be able to relay an idea to people from different industries or different professional backgrounds, and still being effective with getting your ideas across. And then next we have documentation. So with any game, sometimes the larger, the more detail there is, there's going to be a point where it's just too much information to remember for one person alone, or perhaps for multiple people. So it's very important for a game designer to document information, all the details of the game, how the game works, and also the development process details as well. So a game designer will often be involved in documenting quite a lot. And so it's important to have that skill of being able to ensure that things are kept up to date, things are always monitored, and things are always documented. And then the final point that we have, or key skill that we have here, is team working. So games are becoming more and more complex as the years progress. So it's becoming more and more common. You're going to be working with larger development teams. So often it will be the case you'll be working with more than one game designer or multiple departments. So it's important to be able to work in a team. With games having strict deadlines, and it is often be the case, it's important to be effective when you're working with others, regardless if they're not a game designer or not. Being able to work with others regardless of what department or what discipline they're from is vitally important, just to make sure that if things are moving at a pace in order to meet a deadline. The deadline in the games industry are often they do move, but generally they don't often move too much. So deadlines are tight. So in order to be effective, you have to work with your team effectively as well. So that's the quick summary of a game designer. So let's have a look at the next one. So this is a 3D environment artist. So a 3D environment artist are those who bring an idea to life. They may be informed by a level designer who will inform the general layout of a level, how the player is intended to progress. But the 3D environmental artist will be the person who will be responsible to overlay artwork on top of that. So they will be creating the 3D models, the meshes of that environment. They'll be texturing those assets and also possibly integrating them within the level itself. So they the person, or they are the people who bring the idea to life, so to say. They take a very basic plan and they fully develop this. They make it have 3D models, sometimes particle effects, and also environmental animations, things like grass, foliage, wind effects, adding full detail, adding full life to a level, so to say. So let's have a look at some of the key skills associated with a 3D environment artist. So first of all, an artistic and conceptual skills. So this is not just specifically for an environment artist, but this is across the board for all artists. You need to have artistic skills, because there's going to be many games that you'll be working on that won't match the same genre. You'll be working on different themes, different styles, so it's important to have a wide range of artistic skills and also conceptual skills to be able to bring up these ideas and come up with ideas that actually fit the theme and concept itself. And then the second point we have is understanding of art fundamentals. So again, this is actually quite common across many different art roles, but understanding how the process to create 3D models, for example, or concept art, understanding the fundamentals of creating that. What is the process? How do you go about brainstorming? How do you go about ensuring that this model or this asset fits with the remaining assets that's being created? What are the fundamental elements that are needed to formulate this idea and make sure that it's consistent, that it fits in with perhaps there may be many other environmental artists. So you're maybe working with a dozen, if not more. So ensuring that everyone is working on the same wavelength. Thirdly, we have experience working in game engines to integrate art assets. So as I mentioned earlier, it's often the case you may be needed to put your art assets into a level. This is also a benefit to yourself, just to make sure that it's everything in scale, in proportion, or perhaps there might be a few adjustments that needed to be made. But typically with engines like Unreal and Unity, it's not too much of a hassle to integrate some of these assets to the level and to the project itself. So you typically find many environment artists actually do this themselves. And then next, the 3 points that are common across all of these careers. So we have communication. So it's vitally important for artists to communicate together. You may have more than one environment artist, especially if you're working on a large game. They may have a large map. That may mean you may be working in a team of environment artists. So ensuring that your team are communicating effectively and knowing what each other are working on. And then also discussing perhaps with the level designer as well, ensuring that any changes are made, everyone is aware, everyone is up to date, how things are working together. There's a continual back and forth. So there may be a point where you're communicating with multiple departments, but being able to relay the information effectively is vitally important. Next, we have documentation. So in any game development role, you'll be documenting what you'll be working on. So it's important to track what you're doing at any moment. So that way, one of the careers that we'll be looking at later, there's a particular person on the development team who needs to have oversight on everything that's going on in the project. So in the case of an environmental artist, if there's 100 assets that need to be created, well, that needs to be tracked. If someone's completed 50 and no one else knows about that, other members may actually go and make those. That isn't good use of time. So being able to document what you're working on is vitally important. So tracking things are on progress, things that are completed and things that need to be completed are commonly documented for artists, and also maybe things that need to be modified or changed. And then lastly, team working. So again, it may be the case you'll be working in a large art team, but at the same time, you'll be working with other disciplines. So a 3D environment artist may be working with the level designer. The level design may change over time. So the communication, the team working skills there would be in play perhaps throughout the entire development. So ensuring that you're working effectively as a team to make best use of time is vitally important, again, regardless of which one of these careers someone or any of you may be working in. Next, we have a sound designer. So a sound designer are those who are responsible for creating the assets, the audio assets for a game. So that could be the sound effects, so things like footsteps, hit effects, whether it be like weapons, objects interacting with other objects, or crowd noises, or all the general sound effects you'll find in a game. Then you may be including ambience music as well, or ambience noise. the music score, so perhaps it'd be the main menu music, perhaps it'd be the game music, and also voiceovers as well for characters and NPCs, and also the actual integration of these to ensure that they fit the intended design. So as a sound designer, ensuring they match the theme, that they work as intended, in particular if they are triggered events, ensuring they are working as intended. For some of the key skills that are needed for a sound designer, firstly, music theory. So you need to understand, as a theory behind creating the music itself or creating the sound effects. Secondly, we have the experience with audio tools and middleware applications. So there's lots of different tools that a sound designer may use. So software like Logic, Reaper, middleware like Fmod and Wise. Having experience with these will vary from project to project, and also possibly game engine to game engine. But having experience with these is very essential, but it can vary from project to project or studio to studio. Next, we have knowledge of game audio techniques and production fundamentals, so understanding how game audio is created. So there's lots of different techniques and how you go about the production of that. So if you're creating sound effects, you could possibly look at Foley art, for example, how to go about creating audio yourself with a recorder and then processing that to make it fit a particular sound effect you're looking for. And next, our final 3 points that are common across all careers. We have communication. Communicating with other disciplines will be very common. This could be with programmers in particular, especially if there is very complex audio integration needed. It could be with the game designers to ensure that the experience that the designer is intended gets delivered. And also perhaps also communicating with other team members. So you may be working in a large team of sound designers. Next, we have the documentation. So as a sound designer, you may be discussing with your team or planning yourself what assets maybe need to be created, the time scale or the time frame in order to create those, so you can create an effective project management plan for the time length and how long it will take to create these. And also you may need to prioritize. So having all of this documented allows easy access to all of this information. And then finally, team working again. So as a sound designer, you may be working in a team. You may be working with a sound designer. There may be some tweaks. There may be some changes that may need to be made. Perhaps the 3D environmental artist has made some changes that will need to be communicated. That will be a process that all disciplines will work together to ensure that the process is adhered to effectively. There's always lots of changes that occurs during the development of the game, and it's how a team will work together effectively that makes it as harmless as possible, I suppose you could say. The smoother the process goes is based on how effective a team has worked together. So the next career we have, this is a game producer. So a game producer is the person who will be responsible for essentially overseeing the progress of the development of the game. They will see the development from the beginning all the way to the end and have an oversight of every department and every team member. They will have a look at the progress, so they will continuously check how the project is progressing, have there been any issues that have occurred, and how to solve those issues to prevent a delay and a stoppage almost if it's catastrophic, just to make sure that these deadlines and milestones are met. So when we look at some of the key skills that are needed to be a game producer, first of all, project management. So this is vitally important. As a game producer, you'll be overseeing an entire project. So being able to manage that effectively, ensuring deadlines are met, tasks are met on time, tasks are completed, any issues that occur, that they're solved effectively. Being able to manage a project, especially games in particular, is a hard process. So being able to manage effectively is very essential for a game producer. Then next we have leadership, flexibility, and adaptability. So as a game producer, you'll be leading many departments, many team members, ensuring that they all do what's needed. You'll be tasking people should they have a task that they need to complete. So you kind of take a leadership responsibility there. And in terms of flexibility and adaptability, there's always things that can go wrong on the game. It's software development. There's always technical issues that occur that are unforeseen. So being able to adapt to problems, being able to be flexible, to navigate around these issues are an excellent trait to have, and a necessary trait to have, because you often find there's many issues that will occur during the development of the game, and often they are the ones that are unforeseen, that no one's accounted for. And then next, general development knowledge. So having some knowledge of game development in general is of real value. This allows you to be able to understand every process that's occurring during development, not necessarily having to be an expert in every single area, but enough to understand the general processes, what needs to be done, and how an issue may be resolved. You can always refer to someone who has more knowledge, but having an understanding of the basic process is essential. And next, communication. So for a game producer, this is vitally important. Being able to communicate to a large team. You may be communicating to individuals, departments. You'll be communicating quite heavily. So being able to communicate effectively, ensuring that information is getting across effectively and concisely, is something that a game producer will be doing on a regular basis. And then next, documentation. So the documenting of the progression of the project. There's lots of different areas that will need to be looked at in terms of issues, what needs to be given more resources. And in order to know that information, this all needs to be documented. So the game producer will be looking at a project, they'll be looking at every single detail and making sure that all of these are accounted for. And should any of these issues need to be resolved, well, you can refer to the documentation. And then lastly, team working. So this kind of refers back to some of the earlier points, but you'll be working with a very large team, especially if you're a game producer in AAA studios. You'll be working with maybe hundreds, if not more. So being able to work with all of these team members, being able to work in a team is vitally important. Being able to make sure things are done effectively, making sure that information is being passed along correctly and things are moving along. Again, games have tight deadlines. Being able to work in a team effectively is important to make sure these deadlines are met. Next career that we have is a gameplay programmer. So a gameplay programmer are responsible for the development of the game. They will develop the features, the mechanics, the systems from code. They are the people who will actually develop this. They will go into the code and they will create this from scratch. A gameplay programmer will look at the design. They will be informed by the game design document, or they will have discussions with the game designer and have an understanding of how to go about creating this. So whether this be down from experience or through discussion with other programmers, they will go ahead and create this. So having a look at some of the key skills for a gameplay programmer, and some of these are related to programmers overall. Practical knowledge of programming languages like C++ and C#. So these are just a few of the common programming languages for game developers, but having understanding and having experience of these are very vital, if not important. Games are, again, very complex. There's a lot of complexity with the process of making games. So having understanding of languages like C++ and C# is vitally important. There's game engines that have APIs, and they have engines that have been around for years upon years, and having experience and having knowledge of how all of that works is essential for any programmer. And not only that, at the same time, being able to think about a game mechanic from a game designer and trying to translate that into code. So having experience, practical experience, and having the knowledge to be able to convert ideas into code. Next, we have the development experience with game engines. So every programmer will be working with either a custom engine or engines like Unity and Unreal. Having experience with these is essential. It helps the progression of a project based on the experience of that developer. So if someone knows Unity inside and out, and that game is being made in Unreal, well, that person will maybe learning, or there may be some differences in comparison to different engines. So having experience with game engines is vitally important. The more experience you have, the more beneficial it will be. But you'll typically find you have programmers who may stick to one or the other. And next we have math, analytical, and problem-solving skills. So as a programmer, there's lots of different parts of a game that may involve maths, especially if we think about physics, calculations. Not necessarily all the time, but maths is definitely a big part of programming. And then the analytical and problem-solving side. So especially if the game has a number of different issues involved, it's important for a programmer to be able to break down a piece of software and to begin to filter down where these issues are occurring and how to go about solving these issues. And just to go into the final 3 points, communication. So programmers will, in particular gameplay programmers, will often be communicating with the game designer, ensuring things are working effectively and as intended. They may be working in teams of programmers, especially if it's a very complex game. So ensuring that not only the information is clear, but also what's being worked on is being communicated. So making sure all details are covered. Next, we have documentation. So as a programmer, documenting everything that you do is important, again, for the progression of a project. So there's oversight, everyone knows what's being worked on, everyone knows what hasn't been worked on, and that way things are easier to manage. Things are easier to either dedicate resources to, or people know if this particular part of the project is unworked on at this moment in time. There may be a focus switch, especially if it's an essential part of the project. In order to know that information, it needs to be documented, it needs to be seen, and there needs to be oversight to see where people are working. And then finally, team working again. So typically you'll find programmers will be working in large teams, and being able to collaborate, especially with programming where you may be sharing files, you may be working on the same files with other programmers, being able to work effectively and time effectively as well is crucially important with deadlines. Game deadlines are very, very short and they don't often get moved around too much. So ensuring that you can work in a team as best as possible, just like all the other careers that we've discussed today, is essential. It's vitally important. So that's my 5 picks for careers in games. So there's quite a quick summary of a lot of them, and they can go into a lot more depth. But what I would hope this may have helped some of you, or started to get some of you to think about where you would like to possibly be in the future, or where you may like your career to be in the future in games. So what I have for you is just a task I would like all of you to get involved in, and it is to have a look at some of your favorite game studios, or studios that you may like, or ones that you find if you don't have any favorite game studios, and to try and find another 5 careers that are interesting to you and list why those are. So maybe you can't find 3 of those that you 100% would like to do, but have a look at ones that may be of interest, and just to list out why that is the case, why they of interest to you, or why they may potentially be of interest to yourself. So thank you for your time again. Thanks for tuning in today. Hopefully this has been of help to some of you, just to start thinking about some of the different possibilities of where your career may lead you. For those of you who have had a look at some of the 5 different careers where your career may end up, please do share those so we can have a look at those. But again, don't forget to keep an eye out for the future sessions. There are more from the rest of our tutors on the ACM Game Development and Futures program upcoming. And I hope to see you in those as well. So other than that, I hope you all take care and goodbye.